Welcome to Transform Now, brought to you by SSNC, where we explore the future of work through the lens of AI. Across industries, leaders are rethinking strategy, culture, and operations to harness AI's full potential. This podcast gives you the insights and ideas to transform your organization, stay competitive, and thrive in a world driven by change. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. On this episode, we're chatting with David Dean about his book. It just came out. It's called An Inbox Between Us, an interesting look at how work actually gets done in the companies that we work for. David Dean is a technologist and a practitioner with nearly 20 years experience inside complex organizations, working closely to the real decisions, compromises, and quiet workarounds that determine how work gets done. His insights focus less on the systems themselves and more on the human behavior around them, examining where emails, meetings, and informal exchanges reveal how responsibility, risk, and power truly moves through our modern organizations. Welcome, David.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much, Michael.
Well, I'm super happy to talk to you about this because this is really near and dear to my heart. But why did you write this particular book?
So, in my experience working with a lot of ground level teams around solutions and productivity around it, as I was moving into the AI space and truly trying to understand how can people use it, how can we design solutions around it and that type of thing, I took the opportunity to do a lot of journaling because I really needed. There's so much changing, everything. There's constant things coming out, all different ideas and different ways to handle things. So, and just imagine on a regular end user side, like this is very overwhelming around it. Lots of different things are being said. I don't know ultimately what that means. So I wanted to be able to help be a translator for a lot of this stuff. So, over the last couple of years, I was like, there's a lot of information here. So I started looking at it and I'm like, I feel like something needs to be out there to make it human, to make it realistic, the empathy and compassionate way to create understanding on how AI is changing for the individual user and business leaders, non-technical business leaders around this. And so I kind of took a look and was like, I think there's something here. So I took a shot and put something together, and I hope people enjoy what I have to say around it.
Well, I know I did. It really resonated with me. So in part of your book, you mentioned that there's an invisible system at work in our organizations. Can you describe what that means?
Yeah, so there's, in the book, I kind of talk about there's two different contracts. So there's like the documented system, which is ultimately, we all have jobs, we all have duties and responsibilities. We have, goals, values. We have documentation that kind of backs all of that stuff up. That's kind of the official story of a company, and how it works. Then there's also what I call the unwritten contract. And so that unwritten contract is really how the business actually works. It's all the informal workarounds, all the water cooler type of conversations, all those different types of things, how people communicate and collaborate around that. And ultimately that's the invisible operating system that's out there, in where it is really how the business actually works. And there are artifacts out there that document a lot of that. And so reason part of why I call the book the way I call it is that everyone, email's been around for a really long time. Everyone knows what an inbox is and generally what it does with it. But how I'm using it metaphorically is the inbox is this invisible layer that's sitting between all of us in our workplace that documents how our workplace actually works and how we actually happen, the good and the bad aspect on this. And so all this communication and collaboration data has those artifacts in there to be able to really kind of tell the story of how my organization actually executes things day to day, individually and on a grand scale.
Gotcha. So the one thing that intrigued me, like right off the bat, you talked about some bottlenecks and experience. Can you kind of talk us through what you meant by the bottlenecks that lead to experience?
In regards to some of the bottlenecks is that getting the job done, a lot of times, I may not have the tools, I may not have the skills, I may not have the know power of it. And it's all a part of this aspect of everyone in an organization, no matter if you're the CEO or, a frontline worker, there's a psychological safety there. And ultimately that's how we navigate anything that's ultimately asked for us. And we need to work through these types of things with it. And we try to figure it out. And so that's kind of a bottleneck, is because people either don't know or not sure, or they need to learn something, need to understand something, need to ask someone. This is really how the business actually works with it, around it. So, and apologies. What was the second part of your question? My apologies.
You mentioned that sometimes experience
Oh.
is how you overcome this, and what is really experience in reality when it comes to those bottlenecks?
Yeah. So when those bottlenecks happen, you look for the experience. You either create the experience or you look for the experience. So a lot of times, like you ask, like, hey, I know my peer really knows these things. I'm going to go ask them, because it's all what's up in here. And the one thing that I talk about, is that when it comes to the AI conversation, there's one critical aspect that's kind of forgotten. And in regards to the conversation, is that we are systems. We are collections of skills, knowledge, and capabilities. And we are able to do incredible things, as a part of that. And all of that comes out of the lived experience with it. That's something that is valuable about humans, is that we understand lived consequence and learn from our mistakes from a downstream aspect with it. And that's critically important.
Yeah, that makes sense. The what I guess what struck me as I was going through some of that is the experience that you talk about ends up being, here's how I found a way to get around the bottleneck, to rewrite the process in a way that makes it work, but isn't necessarily the documented process. So I thought that was an interesting way of approaching it.
Right.
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's if people are given time, they can be absolutely creative in regards to work around issues and challenges. And ultimately, isn't that why we hire people? Is that we have such a creative nature to us that we think around issues and problems in ways that, not even fathom. And some of it's small, some of it's, very intimate. But a lot of those small things add up. And that's why people ultimately matter in regards to this equation around AI.
Gotcha. So when we start looking at the changes that come about, we're adding AI agents, or we're adding something into the organization. Now it's a very different way of working, and some will look at this and have some resistance. Is the resistance to changing these workflows really about risk, or is it about protecting the power structures that kind of depend on that opacity?
Yeah. So there's always an aspect on, protection, but the one thing what I highlight in the book is that using AI is now an opportunity for self-realization. A company needs to self-realize this, because a lot of our company's story has been fragmented or put together in such a way that it's only in kind of that official documentation. But as I said, that's not really how the business runs, with it. So how can we put together these insights to improve in these different areas with it? And as I said, it scales, but you have to start somewhere. You start with yourselves, you start with your teams, you start as a leader on some of these things to gain these insights. And these insights can be discovered in our productivity, and to create this self-realization, because people need to understand what AI really actually means for them. And it's not here to replace you. It is here to self-discover and enhance you with it. Because the one that a lot of people forget, is that people already have a lot to do. There's the documented processes, but what about the entire backlog of things that never actually get done, with it? And also critical thinking. I mean, what does it mean if I can give my employee more time to think critically around issues and problems to help us move forward and innovate with there? I'm giving them breathing room in regards to around this. And AI is just a tool to be able to help make that happen.
That makes sense. So when we look at just AI in general, these agents and whatnot, where would they enter an existing workflow today, and what human behavior, not which humans, but which human behavior is it replacing implicitly?
So I talk about AI in kind of two categories with this, and I think that makes the most sense for organizations. I talk about self-service, and then I talk about controlled, with it. Self-service ultimately is my general productivity, things that I need to do that are relatively low risk. It just makes me productive and that kind of stuff. That's where things like Claude, Copilot, ChatGPT, and all that kind of stuff kind of ultimately lives around it. Even though there's a lot of other things you can do with it, that's kind of that space. And then there's the controlled AI experience. And that controlled AI experience is you have to understand all the factors. And a lot of times when people have gone out and built AI solutions out there, they've forgotten the most critical element of that, and that is the human. The human works in certain ways, and they handle certain things, and they know certain things with that. And so you have to kind of spend more time. If AI is there to mimic human behavior, then make it human. And I think that's the good and the bad, the conflict and the issues relating to it. That's where AI is really going to help. So it's kind of you have to spend more time with the business, understanding how they work and how they behave, because AI, in all intents and purposes, is just another form of process automation. And so how can I insert an AI opportunity in all these different types of processes that are out there that makes sense and builds trust? And so it's like, from a business person, I don't care if it's AI or not. It does it behind the scenes. Really, what a lot of business users want is push button AI. I push a button, AI goes and does its thing, comes back and spits something out. And then I can either make a decision or I can just let it go, with it. And it's not really, if you study human behavior, and I'm not an expert on this from a behavioral science standpoint. I'm more on from a frontline standpoint, is that as a colleague, hey, can you go take care of this for me? Sure, great. Let me know when it's done. All right, great. I'm going to take a look. All right, looks good. We'll keep going, type of thing. That's real human behavior. That's how we really act as humans with it. And I think from a design standpoint, we should factor that in order to help be successful and make sense for business people.
So if these AI agents are now workers, as you kind of mentioned, kind of this co-worker kind of viewpoint, where's the line where agents are able to decide without a human and where human accountability is required? I mean, how do you design a workflow that clearly aligns to those decision points?
Yeah, so it comes down to what kind of decisions are ultimately being made as a part of this. And that's different for everyone in that regard. There's some general stuff, out there, general frameworks, practice frameworks relating to that. And that can help document. My goal is not to apply, a framework or a practice. I'm more of this is ultimately what it means. Your judgment matters in regards to it. I want you to think about what that output is being provided. Is that output critical to your business process? Is there consequence from downstream things based on what has come out of that? If it is, then it's important for you to review it, around it. If it's not, if it's inconsequential in that regard or relatively low risk around it, that's all right, with it. But if you think in terms of it, isn't that any different than delegation, of a person? Hey, I normally do this, all the time. I'm really intelligent. I've been doing this a long time. I know the good and the bad, from this, but I can't do everything. So I need to delegate it to someone. And so thinking about from a junior worker, aspects like, here, go and take care of this for me. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have issues. They're going to make judgment calls. And it's important that you recognize that, because I need to cultivate that. I need to create a symbiotic relationship. And it's all about relationship management with this, is that I create relationships as a senior person to a junior person, and that bond happens. Now, I know this is not a real person, but it comes down to eliminating that trust deficit. Is like, generally it's going to hit the mark, but it's going to make mistakes. And so at what time do I need to step in, and what time do I not need to step in?
It sounds like for, say, frontline workers, maybe the first level worker, they haven't had to deal with that because they don't manage people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this could be a culture change for them to understand how to have the junior worker manage even more junior workers, right? How do you go about that kind of transition within an organization to understand how that role is shifting?
Yeah, I think one of the things is like, how would you manage yourself? Like, if you could copy yourself multiple times, and how would you interact with yourself, to work together with it? I mean, because ultimately what AI does, it industrializes human behavior with it. So now I have multiple copies of me. I can go and delegate to myself. I mean, everyone kind of pretends that, like, it wouldn't be great if there's multiple versions of me. There's so much that needs to get done with it. Well, how would you coordinate that? It's kind of thinking about that mindset. I'm looking at, if I think there was that movie with Michael Keaton, Multiplicity, and all the different, I have all these different copies of me essentially trying to do X, Y, and Z with it around it. But I'm delegating. You go this, you go, take care of this, you go take care of this. They all have to work. Is it going to be bumpy? Absolutely, it's going to be bumpy, with it. Trying to get yourself to coordinate with yourself. I mean, even as an individual, that's tough. But now I have an opportunity to delegate some of these things with it. And then I'll come around and take a look. But it still comes down to, you are more of a conductor now with some of these things. You're going to kind of oversee the work that's happening. But even from a machinist standpoint, like if you think about, like, I'm working in a manufacturing facility, and I have machines that are essentially, you're going to carve this out, you're going to extract this, you're going to do this. I'm still standing behind and watching it. I'm still monitoring it. I will stop and I will step in when I need to step in. That's not any different. And I think people really work that way. It's just a slight shift in regards to mindset around that. And that's where change management teams and, practice frameworks come into play with it. I just want to create this realization of that humans still matter in this entire equation, and they're critically important, even when we hit something like AGI, around that, because it still comes down to that lived experience and lived consequence, with it. And then I wrote a newsletter recently about, like, the LaGuardia plane crash situation that happened, and it was coming to find out that pilot had a 6-second decision to either swerve or hit dead on, in that situation. No AI is going to understand the lived consequence of that decision. All the families, everyone who's going to be affected, what is everyone going to live through? But that one pilot knew that and made the decision that he made with it. That's why humans matter through this entire process, and that's why they will continually matter.
That makes sense to me, for sure, understanding the consequences part of it, because as we look, not everything's going to be life and death, right? There are things within our processes that are very mundane.
Yep.
So when we start looking at that responsibility piece, do you see it as, we mentioned a junior employee, do you see it as something that we can eventually offset or trust the AI with enough to allow it to make decisions that are inconsequential, or are we always to have a human owner along every step because of the accountability required?
The way I see it is that the cultivation of knowledge is It's no different than teaching your kid to ride a bike. You eventually have to trust your kid that they will be able to ride the bike. Doesn't mean that they're not going to, down the road, fall off the bike or make a decision that's not ideal. And this is kind of when I talk about designing AI solutions, even here is like, how can I put the guardrails for me on the things that I'm not comfortable with? And then how can I adjust it when I'm comfortable? I've put enough of myself and my knowledge and my capability into that cultivation over time with it. And then let's take the training wheels off, with it and make it autonomous with it. But your business members need to be a part of that equation with it. And this is something that I do when I design AI solutions is, I like this concept of a checkbox, autonomous or non-autonomous, with it. You decide when you're ready for it to be fully autonomous with it, because you put your life into how that works, just as if with an employee, just as with your child and that kind of thing. That's really how we should be designing solutions with it, because it's going to take time to build that trust with those business users. Otherwise, they're just not going to use it because that trust deficit is not there. Oh, just trust me, it works. Let it prove it to you that it will actually work over time, and then they're like, okay, great, it works for me.
This is sort of an eventual transition to that, where every step along the way initially has some kind of human connection to it, so that the training wheels are still on, and I am still holding on to my quote unquote AI child as I'm teaching them to ride their bike.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, when we feel whatever the output has been consistent enough, then we can start taking the training wheels off.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I see.
Yeah. And I think there's something about knowledge management around this, especially when it comes to AI solutions. Do I, as the subject matter expert, have control to enhance that knowledge, with it? Or am I just, I'm just trusting you as, large language model to just totally understand that, with it? I don't trust that you totally understand how I work and how I think with it. But if you give me a degree of control to provide that insight, and so feedback loops and those types of things matter, but I almost talk about it like this knowledge management hub. And I almost don't really see that in a lot of AI solutions, giving the business to be able to control their destiny in regards to their experience and their knowledge, and when they can make adjustments and tweaks where appropriate, so that it can be better for them.
Gotcha. So when you're redesigning a workflow and including AI along the way in various nodes, you're going to have to document everything, right? And so the idea behind it is now those opaque semi-processes that were being used by people to band-aid a solution because the real process didn't work right, they get exposed. So does AI actually increase risk, or does it just remove the ability to hide it?
It removes the ability to hide it. There's always going to be risk factors no matter what, with it. Because in all intents and purposes I use a couple of terms when it comes to AI, especially when it comes to self-service and having accessibility to the inbox, with it is, I can, it's kind of like the ETL of my organization's behavior with it, around from a data ingestion process. I gather all this data to put it somewhere to tell a story with it. That's essentially what, I talk about in this book a lot, is that I can utilize this now to tell that story on a small scale and even potentially on a much larger scale to create insights that I never had insights. And it doesn't need to be 100% accurate. It just needs to have enough of the story to paint a picture that something is there, and and there's opportunity there to discover. So I think the word I like to use is authenticity I think it forces a company to be more authentic. I think it forces people to be more authentic because all of this data was fragmented, and you could still put this picture together manually. But now AI has given me this opportunity to put all this stuff together to tell the story that I need to hear in order to self-improve.
Gotcha. All right. So not everybody is in IT. Not everybody has a technical background. So when we start looking at different roles in the organization, are we prepared to admit that some of the human roles were actually never about decision making, but about absorbing some of the organizational inefficiencies? And what happens when those job roles become more exposed as AI takes on the efficiencies and creates sort of identity crisis? What happens?
Well, I think it comes down to the kind of the lens that you want to understand. I think companies that recognize that they have issues and challenges and want to be a better company, it comes from a frame of mind, with it, and they realize that everyone does things differently. Everyone has psychological safety. Everyone has issues, conflicts around all these different types of things with it. That's not in the question. It's just how can we be better, with it, and versus a company that thinks AI is just going to solve everything, with this. If you are a company that has a lot of challenges and you think AI is going to just magically take care of those challenges, it's really just going to enhance those challenges in the long run. You have to kind of self-realize and accept some of these things. And so there's things that are going to be discovered, that are not ideal, for people to have discovered, but it comes down to the right lens for these different types of things with it. And to me, that aspect is really what I want a lot of the practitioners that are out there that are putting together frameworks and that kind of stuff around it is, this is out here now. Utilize it as a tool to self-discover, with it. Be real. That's one thing I call I classify myself as a business AI realist because I wanted to be real and practical with it. And I kept saying that when I was journaling and all this kind of things, how can I make this reality? Because I've lived through it. A lot of the people I worked with lived through that. How can I make this real for them around it? And if an organization wants to understand how much that undocumented process, you can just look, there's all kinds of artifacts out there. And I'm not talking about emails. I'm talking about, have you ever asked why this spreadsheet exists and what business purpose it serves? Why was it created? What were the people thinking to create that? Why are they maintaining it this way with it? Because that is an artifact of psychological safety. A lot of times is I'm just going to go with what I know to be able to move the business through it. I've been asked to make this happen with it. There are tens of thousands of these in organizations with it. And it's not just those kinds of things. There's tracking, collaboration tracking lists, access databases are still all over the place, in organizations with that. Have you ever asked why? Why is this this way? And it comes down to that aspect of, I'm just trying to get the job done. And I'm going with what I know to be able to get this job done, with it. So, and ultimately when people don't trust AI, what do they go back to? They go back to the spreadsheet, to do a lot of those different things. So, I joke around with some of my peers and that kind of stuff. If the AI companies really wanted to take on and change business, they would figure out how to eliminate the spreadsheet out of business as much as possible with it. That would have great change, across the board, because that is kind of one of the primary artifacts of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree that spreadsheets end up being that Band-Aid that kind of covers everything, right? Because the data's in there, I can shift it around through email, however we want to send it. It's low tech enough for people to be able to access easily. Yet it's powerful enough to get the information out that they wanted to do. So, if we're looking at AI and we're seeing the changes because we are now introducing AI into the workflow, what thinking work? Do we want humans to reclaim once the AI agents absorb all the coordination, triage, follow-ups, and busy work that are happening? Where's time going to go?
So the time's going to go to, is as I said, people have had an extensive backlog of things to do with it. And a lot of those tedious tasks that people had to do, related to it, that's going to slowly downsize over time. So now I can focus on things that are more critical, that it takes a little bit more thought process. It takes more time to cultivate this. I may use AI to help me, to cultivate these ideas and put things together, but it still comes down to, is this even a good idea? Is this even a good approach, to do these different things? How can I use AI in a way to be more creative in regards to be able to help myself and help the organization with it? And that's what's amazing about us, is that we think in ways that AI will never will with it. And that's critically important. And that's why they matter, is being able to have that critical time in order to be able to do those types of things with this. And with any change, positions will change over time no matter what. That's the story of, of business, around it. So I know, eliminating jobs, but I think it's more of just your position will change. So 5 years from now, positions that you're working right now won't exist, but that's not anything new, with it. So, you're going to kind of mold into, like, how can I develop this symbiotic relationship with AI to industrialize my behavior in ways that I've never even thought of, so that I can be able to help provide value to me and to the organization. And that's the breathing room that everyone's been asking for, with it. And it will give us that opportunity to do that.
That makes sense. So our organizations aren't perfect, right? But is it that AI is now giving us a magnifying glass to look into this because of how it interacts with us?
Yeah, I mean, we have trained AI to look at signals, all different kinds of signals, all different kinds of relationships. I mean, it's all math, behind the scenes with it. So, and correlations and statistics and all that kind of stuff with it. So how things are close to each other to essentially tell the story that I'm looking for. And that's, and when it comes to self-service and these different types of things and tasks, like, the lens is like, oh, I can do all this stuff, or I can find this piece of information with it. But how can I understand, how we work and around this? And that's kind of where, like, I would say, when it comes to, like, getting started with AI, how can I use AI to discover how we work so we can better understand how AI is going to be effective for us as an organization? So almost even taking a step back, from around some of these things is create that self-realization. Now, a lot of people do this. You have change managers, you have business analysts, you have, especially from a software development standpoint, you have people and business leaders that are coaches that spend this time, like, why is this happening? Why are these things going on with this? And let's take a step back. Well, now AI, to a certain degree, has those signals. I have to still recognize what those signals mean in there. AI can help, but you still need to kind of put together, what does this mean with it? So, like, why does this contract approval process take forever? Well, it takes forever because, the people involved have uncertainty. Well, what does that uncertainty mean? Well, certain thresholds, certain things relating to, they're afraid to say yes. Why are they afraid to say yes? Because of risk, relating to it. What about the risk on that? So it's kind of unfolding around that. And all of that communication and collaboration is in, your emails and transcripts and all around that. Let's work through the problem, and figure out, how can we overcome this? Is there something we can put in place so this can be moved faster from a psychological safety standpoint, rather than trying to have a system that replaces it, with it, because the system might be perfectly fine, but how can I use AI to create insights to improve my human system to be able to move faster, move more quickly?
That makes sense. So last question on this one is, we may take it from two different perspectives. What is the risk for a person not taking some of the things that you've written in your book to heart? And what's the risk for an organization doing the same thing? What's the risk for them not understanding the things you've uncovered?
So for the person, I would say is that things are going to move fast. A lot of change is going to ultimately happen with it. And it's and that trust deficit is only going to continue. You may be forced into a situation where you have to do that, but that trust deficit will never heal in that regard with it. And you will never feel like you have control. And the idea is that I want you to feel like you have control over how you work with this. And that's a part of, from a psychological safety standpoint, people want control over their lives, the way they work. They want to feel appreciated, all that type of thing. And I think by reading this, you will realize you have a lot more control than you realize with this. And this will give you some insights on a way of thinking to be prepared for that and understand what's happening with it. From an organizational standpoint, it's, to a certain degree, if you don't truly understand this, it's kind of like you're just kind of pushing the buck down. A lot of times, let's build this solution to make this happen, with it. But are you really building a solution? Or are you just moving the same problem just somewhere else, with it? And that's what I think is really happening with some of these things, is that they're not spending enough time with the people that matter, the smart, intelligent people that do this undocumented job every day. You're just shifting, dysfunction in an organization in a lot of different ways, or you're shifting risk in a certain way relating to it. And I think it comes down to you have to embrace your people. And I think the hardest thing is that takes time. The tools that I talk about, like the insights, helps accelerate that, so I can come with questions, to all these really intelligent people in the organization. Like, why do we do it this way? Why is it handled this way around some of this stuff, to accelerate those conversations? And that's really what I want people to do. Self-realize as an organization, because if you don't self-realize, you're really not addressing the issues and challenges you're facing as an org.
That's really good advice. That is really good advice. Well, David, thank you so much for just talking with me today about this. I'm going to leave a link for the book you have called An Inbox Between Us. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes for folks who want to check that out. So thanks again for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I just want to last say, all you working people, you matter, you're critically important, and you will continue to matter. Thank you for having me.
Wise advice. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.